The night was quiet in the small human settlement. The streets outside empty, the wind pressing softly against old wooden walls. Inside a narrow house, a man worked in his kitchen. His hands moved slowly, cutting vegetables, boiling water, preparing. A meal that carried no joy, only the dull routine of survival. His eyes were heavy with loneliness. The fire from the stove gave a faint glow, painting shadows across the cracked ceiling. He often cooked for himself, and though he ate well enough, he always felt something missing. Food kept him alive, but it never made him feel alive. That night he sighed, lowering the knife and looking at the half-cooked meal, when he heard something behind him. A soft voice, almost like a whisper, broke the silence. "I don't talk much, human." He froze. The knife slipped from his fingers and clattered on the counter. He turned, his heart racing. Standing near the doorway was not a neighbor, not a friend, but a girl unlike anyone he had seen before. Her skin carried faint markings that glowed like silver threads under the firelight. Her eyes were wide but not threatening, more like those of someone uncertain whether to run or stay. She stood barefoot, her clothes torn, dust from the road clinging to her. She looked weak, hungry, but strangely calm. Her gaze never left him. "I can cook," she said softly, her voice trembling as if each word cost her strength. The man stared, his mind racing. An alien, inside his home. No sign of how she came, and he should have shouted, should have pushed her out, but something in her face stopped him. There was no malice there, only exhaustion and a quiet plea hidden behind her silence. He reached for the knife again, not to attack, but to steady his hand. "How did you come here?" he asked, his tone careful, his eyes narrowing. She lowered her head, her long dark hair falling across her face. "The door was open," she whispered, then looked up again, her eyes filled with a strange light. "I can help if you let me, human." Suspicion burned inside him. Aliens were not trusted here. Too many stories of betrayal, too many warnings, from the settlement elders. But her body language spoke louder than those stories. Her hands were thin, shaking, her posture bent as if she had walked for miles without rest. She looked like someone who had carried more pain than words could describe. "Cook," he repeated, unsure whether to laugh or frown. "You think food will make me trust you?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she moved closer to the counter. Her eyes landed on the vegetables, on the half-burned stew. She reached out, then stopped, waiting for his permission. The man hesitated, his breath caught in his chest, then finally gave a small nod. She moved with care, like a stranger, in holy ground. Her hands were steady now, as if the kitchen itself gave her strength. She touched the pot, adjusted the flame, sprinkled a pinch of dried herbs he had forgotten on the shelf. The smell began to change, filling the air with a richer aroma. He watched in silence, unable to deny the transformation. The girl did not speak again, yet each movement of hers carried a story. She peeled, cut, stirred, not wasting a single action. There was elegance in her silence, a language older than words. The man leaned against the wall, still tense, but also strangely drawn to her presence. When the food was ready, she set a bowl before him and stepped back, waiting. He lifted the spoon slowly, tasting the stew. His eyes widened. The flavor was unlike anything he had known, simple but alive with warmth. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt something awaken in his chest. He looked at her, and she looked back without a smile, without pride, only quiet expectation. It was as if she was asking him silently, "Now do you understand why I am here?" The man placed the spoon down. Questions flooded his mind. Who was she? Why had she come? What danger followed her? But when he opened his mouth, he did not ask any of them. Instead, he said, "Sit. Eat with me." Her eyes flickered, surprised. She moved closer, almost hesitant, then sat across from him. Together they ate in silence, the fire crackling softly between them. Outside, the wind howled across the empty street, but inside the kitchen something new had begun. It was not trust yet, not safety, not peace. It was only the first spark of something larger. The quiet encounter between a lonely human and a silent alien girl who claimed she could cook and who might carry secrets heavier than the food she prepared. The man knew his life had just shifted, though he could not yet see how. And in the shadows of her tired eyes there was a story waiting to be revealed. A story that would test his heart, his courage, and the fragile bond they had just begun to build. The morning light crept into the small house touching the kitchen walls with a pale glow. The man rose early as he always did, but this time he was not alone. The alien girl sat at the wooden table, her hands folded, her eyes watching the empty stove. She had not spoken much since the night before, yet her silence was heavy with meaning. The man rubbed his eyes and studied her. She looked fragile, her clothes torn and her frame thin, but there was something strong beneath that weakness. He remembered the flavor of the stew she had made, how it had warmed his chest in a way no meal of his own ever had. He could not deny that her presence changed the air of the house. "You stayed," he said quietly, his voice carrying a mix of suspicion and curiosity. Her eyes lifted to meet his. She nodded once, slow and firm. "You let me cook," she answered. The words were simple, but behind them was gratitude. He poured water into a pot, placing it over the flame. The girl rose from the table, stepping forward. Without asking, she began to prepare. She took his knife, sharper now in her careful grip, and sliced vegetables with a precision that surprised him. She moved quickly, but with control, as though she had done this every day of her life. The man leaned on the counter, arms crossed, watching. "Where did you learn this?" he asked. Her hands did not pause, yet her voice was low. "From my mother, before they sent me away." The words lingered, in the air like smoke. He felt a weight in them, but he did not push her for more. She kept cutting, mixing, tasting. She found herbs he rarely used, crushing them between her fingers before adding them to the pot. Soon the smell filled the room again, richer, stronger than anything he had cooked for himself. He sat down at the table waiting. She served the food without speaking, setting a bowl in front of him, then another for herself. For the first time, he noticed how her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the spoon to her lips. Hunger, exhaustion, or perhaps fear. He could not tell. He took a bite. The flavor startled him once more. It was not just food, it was comfort. A mixture of human taste and something alien, something sharper, brighter, almost alive. He felt heat spread through his chest, the kind of warmth he had forgotten existed. "You can really cook," he admitted almost to himself. Her lips curved faintly, not a full smile, but a shadow of one. "It is the only thing I can do well," she said. He studied her in the quiet that followed. She did not speak like someone boasting. She spoke like someone holding on to the last piece of herself that had not been broken. The silence between them grew heavy again. Yet it was not empty. It carried questions he was afraid to ask and truths she was not ready to share. When the bowls were empty, she gathered them without hesitation. She washed the dishes, wiped the counter, and even cleaned the stove. Every movement was careful, almost ritual. She treated his small kitchen like a place of importance, as though it was more than wood and stone. The man finally asked the question, pressing at his mind. "Why here? Why me?" She paused, her back still turned to him. Then she answered, her voice softer than the crackle of the dying fire. "Because you left the door open and because you did not push me away." He frowned. That was no answer, not really. Yet it was all she would give. The day stretched on. She did not leave the kitchen. Whenever hunger struck, she cooked again, preparing small meals from what little he had. Each dish tasted new, each one better than the last. He began to wonder how many recipes lived inside her mind, how many secrets she carried in the skill of her hands. As the sun began to set, the man felt a strange realization. For the first time in years, his house did not feel empty. The quiet was still there, but it was not the quiet of loneliness. It was the quiet of something fragile beginning to grow. But beneath that fragile peace there was danger. He noticed how she glanced at the window often, her eyes sharp when footsteps echoed outside. She never spoke of fear, yet her body betrayed her. She was not only here to cook, she was hiding, and whatever she was hiding from might soon find its way to his door. He sat by the fire, watching her prepare one more meal as the shadows deepened around them. The taste of survival was in every bite she made, yet he knew survival alone was not enough. This girl carried a story, and that story was not done with her, or with him. The man realized he had opened his door to more than a quiet guest. He had opened it to a storm he could not yet see, and every dish she cooked pulled him deeper into it. The nights in the settlement were colder than the days, and inside the small house the fire cracked and whispered. The man sat by the table with folded arms while the alien girl moved in the kitchen again. He had given her food supplies that would normally last him 2 weeks, yet somehow she stretched them, mixing flavors and creating meals that felt richer than anything he had known. He realized he had stopped questioning her presence out loud. The first night was shock, the second was doubt, but by the third night he no longer asked why she stayed. Instead, he watched her, searching for answers in her silence. She never spoke unless necessary. Her voice was quiet, her words simple, but her hands carried confidence. Every slice of the knife, every stir of the spoon, every small gesture in the kitchen built a rhythm that pulled him in. As he watched, he began to notice the truth hidden in her movements. She was skilled, yes, but she was also afraid. When the wood outside cracked or footsteps echoed on the dirt road, she froze for a moment, her shoulders tight, her eyes flicking toward the door. She never admitted fear, yet he could feel it. That night, after a shared meal, he finally spoke. "You are running from something." She looked at him across the firelight. Her eyes reflected the flames, silver and gold dancing in the dark. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she lowered her gaze. "They do not want me among them." "Who is they?" he pressed. Her jaw tightened. "My people." The words hung between them. The man leaned back, his breath heavy. Aliens in the settlement were rare, most of them kept away by old laws and old anger. If her own people cast her out, then her being here was not chance. She lifted her hands, showing faint scars across her skin, thin lines that glowed faintly. "I was not silent once. I spoke for humans. I said they should not be feared. For that I was punished." Her voice cracked, but she quickly covered it, lowering her hands and staring at the fire. The man felt a heaviness in his chest. He had always known humans were seen as lesser by many alien species, but to hear it from her lips and to see the pain etched into her skin made it more real than stories. "You came here for safety," he said. She nodded once. "And because I can cook. It is the one gift left to me. If I cannot speak, if I cannot belong, then I can still feed. That is survival." The man studied her face. She was not begging, not asking him to protect her. She simply explained herself, with the honesty of someone who had nothing left to lose. A long silence followed, broken only by the fire. Finally, he leaned forward, his eyes steady. "If you stay here, you will cook, but more than that, you will not be alone." Her head lifted, her eyes wide. "Why?" she asked. He shrugged. "Because no one should face the night alone." The girl's lips trembled as though she might speak again, but no words came. Instead, she lowered her eyes and gave a slow nod. That nod was small, but it was enough. The pact between them was not signed with ink, not sealed with blood, but with shared meals and quiet understanding. They had chosen not to push each other away. In the following days, their bond grew in silence. She still avoided long conversations, but he began to understand her through actions. When she placed herbs near his side of the plate, it meant she had noticed what flavors he liked. When she worked late into the night cleaning and preparing, it meant she wanted to repay his shelter. When her eyes lingered on the door, it meant danger was still close. He learned to answer her silence with his own. He did not press her with endless questions, but his presence became steady, a wall she could lean against without asking. The world outside remained hostile. The settlement was restless with rumors of alien patrols nearby. Strangers asked too many questions, and shadows stretched longer each night. Yet inside the house, in the simple glow of the kitchen fire, the human and the alien girl created a fragile peace. One evening, as they ate another quiet meal, the girl finally spoke words that carried more weight than any before. "If they find me, you will be in danger too." The man met her gaze. His voice was calm but firm. "Then let them come." Her eyes softened. For the first time, her lips formed something close to a true smile. It was small, fleeting, but it lit her face in a way that no fire could. In that moment, without ceremony, their pact deepened. They were no longer a human and a fugitive alien. They were two souls bound by silence, by shared meals, by a trust built in the simplest yet strongest way, through survival together. The night settled heavy over the settlement, pressing against the windows of the small house. The human sat near the fire with his arms resting on his knees, while the alien girl moved quietly in the kitchen. She had become part of the house now, her rhythm blending with the crackle of flames and the scent of herbs that lingered in the air. Yet something in her manner was different tonight. Her movements were sharp, not calm, and her eyes flicked toward the door more often than before. The man noticed. He had learned to read her silence, and tonight her silence was filled with unease. "What is it?" he asked. She paused, knife still in her hand. Her shoulders stiffened before she answered. "They are near." He frowned. "Who?" "My people," she said. The words came out like cold iron. "They are searching. They know I am not with them. They will not rest until I am found." The man stood, his chest tight. He walked toward the window and pulled the curtain aside. The street outside was empty, but the air carried a weight, as if unseen eyes watched from the shadows. He let the curtain fall and turned back to her. "Why?" he asked. "Why are they hunting you?" Her hand trembled slightly, but she set the knife down and faced him. "Because I broke their law. Because I chose compassion." She stepped closer to the fire, the glow painting her silver scars more clearly. "My people are strict. They value strength, control, and silence. To them, humans are weak, nothing more than a burden. But I spoke against that. I defended humans. I told them you deserved respect. They punished me. They marked me and cast me out." The man listened in silence, his jaw tightening. He could see it now. The faint lines across her skin, the way she carried herself as though she had survived. Something more brutal than hunger or exile. "They will not forgive me," she whispered. "To them, betrayal is worse than death. If they find me here, they will not only take me, they will destroy anyone who gave me shelter." Her words cut into him like a blade. He knew she was not lying. The fear in her eyes was too real, the tremor in her voice too raw. Still, he stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Then they cannot find you." She shook her head. "You do not understand. They always find what they seek. They will smell my trail, follow my silence, track me until there is nowhere left to hide." For a moment the fire hissed, sparks leaping into the air. The house felt smaller, the walls closing in. The man imagined armed aliens moving through the streets, breaking doors, pulling people into the night. His stomach twisted at the thought, but then he looked at her, standing there with her fragile strength, her scars glowing like quiet wounds, and something inside him hardened. "If they come here," he said firmly, "they will not take you without going through me." Her eyes widened, disbelief flashing across her face. "Why would you risk yourself? You owe me nothing." "Because you are here," he replied, his voice calm but strong. Because you fed me, because you reminded me what warmth feels like. That is reason enough. She stared at him, her lips parting as though she wanted to argue, but no words came. Instead, she lowered her head, her dark hair falling across her face. For a moment, her shoulders shook as though holding back tears. Then she straightened, and though her voice was soft, it carried weight. Then we stand together. The pact they had formed before was now tested. It was no longer about meals or silence. It was about survival against forces stronger than both of them. That night, she did not sleep. She stayed near the window, eyes fixed on the shadows outside. The man kept the fire alive, his hand never far from the kitchen knife resting on the table. Every creak of the house made them tense. Every whisper of wind sounded like footsteps. Hours passed, but no one came. The street remained empty, the night heavy with threats that had not yet arrived. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, she finally spoke again. They will not give up. This was only the beginning. The man nodded. He already knew. Whatever peace they had found inside the small house was fragile, and the storm from her past was moving closer with each passing hour. But he also knew one thing more. He was not afraid of the fight ahead. For the first time in years, he had a reason to stand his ground, a reason to guard his door, a reason to face whatever shadows crept toward them. And that reason stood across from him, silent, scarred, and determined to live. The sun dipped low behind the hills, painting the sky in red and gray. The human's small house stood at the edge of the settlement, quiet and hidden among crooked fences and old trees. Inside, the kitchen fire burned steady, casting its glow on two figures who had slowly learned to share silence without fear. The man had once seen his kitchen as nothing more than a place to prepare meals, a place of routine and survival. Now it was changing. With the alien girl beside him, the small room began to feel alive. Each time she stirred a pot or placed herbs on the table, the air carried warmth that went beyond the fire. She was no longer a stranger at his counter. She moved like she belonged there, arranging tools, sharpening knives, wiping the wooden boards with care. She treated the space with respect, as if the kitchen itself had given her a second life. The man watched her closely, noticing how her scars caught the firelight, glowing faintly as if telling stories without words. One evening, as she prepared another meal, the man asked, "Why food? Why not something else?" She paused, her hands resting on the handle of the pot. For a moment she did not answer, then she lifted her gaze. Because food can heal when words cannot. Food can say you are safe, even when the world outside says you are not. Her voice was quiet, yet it struck him harder than any speech. He realized she was not simply cooking to fill their stomachs. She was cooking to build trust, to build a place where she could exist without judgment. The days passed, and the kitchen turned into more than a room. It became their refuge. Whenever voices outside grew loud, whenever rumors of alien patrols reached the settlement, they stayed close to the fire, cooking, eating, cleaning, repeating small rituals that held the storm away. The man began to notice details he had never cared for before. The way she sprinkled salt with her fingertips, the way she leaned closer to smell the steam, the way her lips curved slightly when he praised her cooking. Those details filled the silence with meaning. Yet, danger was never far. At night, when the settlement grew still, footsteps sometimes echoed outside their door. Shadows moved across the window. Each time the girl froze, her eyes sharp with fear. The man kept his knife close, his body ready. But the strangers always passed by, leaving the house untouched. One night after such footsteps faded, she spoke words she had never dared before. "They will not stop. But if I must fall, I want to fall after I have given something back. If my food is remembered, then I will not be forgotten." The man shook his head. "You will not fall. Not here, not while I breathe." His tone was steady, almost harsh, but behind it was the truth of his heart. He had grown used to her presence. More than that, he had grown protective. He realized he no longer saw her as a guest. She had become part of his life, part of his house, part of his fire. The girl lowered her eyes, her voice softer now. Then this kitchen is no longer yours alone. It is ours. The words struck deeper than she might have intended. For the man, they carried weight heavier than any promise. The kitchen, once a lonely space of dull meals, had become a sanctuary where two lives blended into one rhythm. Still, the shadow of her past loomed. News spread through the settlement. Strange watchers had been seen at the edge of the town, cloaked figures who asked too many questions. The man heard whispers in the market, stories of alien trackers moving closer. Each rumor tightened the knot in his chest, but each night when he returned home and saw her by the fire, cutting herbs, stirring pots, moving with quiet grace, he felt the strength to face whatever came. The kitchen became their shield. Within those walls, they built a fragile world where scars did not matter and silence was not empty. The girl, once banished and hunted, found a place where her gift was not a burden, but a bridge, and the man, once lonely and weary, found a reason to fight for more than his own survival. As the firelight danced on their faces, both of them knew the storm outside was closing in. Yet neither spoke of it. They did not need to. The kitchen was more than a refuge now. It was a promise. Whatever came, they would stand together at this table, side by side, bound not by words but by the quiet strength of a shared life. The storm arrived without warning. It began with a distant hum in the night, low and steady, like thunder hidden beneath the ground. The man and the alien girl froze in the kitchen, their eyes locked on each other as the sound grew louder. She knew it before he did. The hunters had come. She set down the ladle she had been holding, her hands trembling as she whispered, "They are here." The man rose from his chair, his jaw tight. He moved to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see the street outside. Shadows crept between the houses. Figures cloaked in dark armor moved with precision, their steps silent, their eyes glowing faint under the moonlight. Alien trackers. He let the curtain fall, his chest heavy with the weight of choice. "They found you," he said, his voice steady, though his heart raced. She lowered her head. "I should leave. If I stay, they will destroy this house and you with it." He shook his head sharply. "If you walk out that door, they will tear you apart. I will not allow it." Her eyes widened. "Why would you risk your life? You do not understand what they can do. They burn everything in their path." The man's hand fell to the kitchen knife resting on the counter. He lifted it slowly, the blade glinting in the firelight. "Then let them burn. But they will not take you without a fight." The girl's breath caught. For a moment she stared at him as though seeing him for the first time. Then she stepped closer, her voice breaking. "If you fight, you will die. Better to die standing," he answered, "than live watching you dragged into the dark." Silence filled the kitchen. Only the fire cracked, casting sparks into the air. The girl turned toward the stove, her hands moving quickly. She pulled down jars, dried herbs, and small packets she had hidden among the supplies. "Then we fight together," she said firmly. The man frowned. "What are you doing?" Her hands moved with purpose. "My people taught me more than cooking. These herbs can burn with smoke that blinds. This powder can choke their lungs. If fire is the language of survival, then we will use fire." The man watched as she spread the ingredients on the counter, mixing them with careful precision. For the first time, he saw not only a cook, but a fighter, someone who had carried her knowledge through exile and was now ready to turn it into a weapon. Outside, the hum grew louder. Heavy footsteps pressed against the dirt road. A voice in alien tongue barked orders. The girl's hands shook, but her eyes burned with determination. The man set the knife aside and pulled a heavy iron pan from the wall. He gripped it tightly, testing the weight. "This kitchen has fed me long enough. Tonight it will defend me." The girl glanced at him, her lips curving faintly. "Then let us see if your kitchen can hold against the fire outside." The first knock rattled the door, hard and sharp, shaking the frame. A voice shouted in a language the man could not understand, but the girl flinched at the words. "They are demanding me. They know I am here." The man moved to the door, pressing his hand against the wood. His heart pounded, but his stance was steady. Then they will have to come through me. The second knock was louder, followed by a blow that splintered the wood. The girl set her mixture on the stove, the fire roaring as smoke began to rise. "When they break in, throw this into the flame," she said, pointing to the pan of herbs and powder. "It will blind them long enough for us to strike." The man nodded, gripping the iron pan in one hand, ready. The third strike shattered the lock. The door swung inward and shadows flooded into the kitchen. Armored figures stepped through, their glowing eyes searching. The girl lifted her hand, signaling. The man swung the pan into the fire, sending a burst of smoke and sparks into the room. The hunters coughed, their vision clouded. The man roared, striking with the iron pan, while the girl moved with quick precision, scattering more powder into the flames. The kitchen filled with choking haze, but within that haze they fought side by side. The man struck one down, the pan ringing against armor. The girl hurled boiling water from the pot, steam rising and forcing the hunters back. For every blow, they landed. Another came against them, yet neither yielded. The small kitchen, once their refuge, had become a battlefield of fire and survival. At last, the smoke cleared enough to reveal the hunters retreating, dragging their wounded out into the street. One of them snarled in their alien tongue a promise of return before vanishing into the night. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of the dying fire. The man leaned heavily against the wall, his chest heaving. The girl stood near the counter, her eyes still burning though her body trembled. "They will come again," she whispered. The man lifted his head, his voice rough but firm. "Then let them. We are still standing." Her gaze softened, and for the first time since she had entered his house, she smiled fully, not faint or broken, but true. "Then this is no longer just your fight. It is ours." The smoke from the battle still lingered in the kitchen, clinging to the walls, mixing with the smell of herbs and scorched wood. The man leaned on the table, his breath heavy, while the alien girl slowly placed the pot back on the fire. Her hands trembled, yet her movements remained careful, as though cooking was the only way to bring order back into the chaos. The house had survived, though scarred. The door was broken, chairs overturned, and the floor marked with ash. But they were alive. That truth alone gave the fire in the man's chest the strength to keep burning. She looked at him from across the room. Her eyes were tired, her body weak, yet in her gaze there was light. "They will come again," she said, her voice soft. "But tonight, we won." The man nodded. He lifted the iron pan, now dented from the blows, and set it back on the wall. "Tonight we proved we are not easy to break." She stirred the pot, adding what little remained of their supplies. Soon the air filled with the scent of warm broth. The simple smell carried a strange comfort, almost as if the house itself was breathing again after holding its breath during the fight. When the meal was ready, she carried 2 bowls to the table. She set one before him, then took her seat across from him. For a long while neither spoke. They simply ate, letting the warmth of the food push back the chill of fear. At last, the man broke the silence. "You could have run. Even when they broke through the door, you stayed. Why?" She lowered her spoon slowly. Her eyes shimmered in the firelight as she answered, "Because this is the only place where I am not treated as less. Because you did not cast me out when you could have. I have no world left except this one. If I leave, I lose everything. If I fight here, I have something worth fighting for." Her words struck deep. The man had lived years in solitude, never expecting anyone to share his home, his table, his silence. Now he realized this girl, hunted and scarred, had filled the emptiness he once thought permanent. "You are not a burden," he said firmly. "You belong here." Her lips trembled, and for a moment her silence broke into a smile, gentle, real, the kind that carried both relief and hope. The night passed slowly, but with each flicker of the fire, the house no longer felt like a lonely refuge. It felt like a place where 2 broken lives had chosen to heal together. In the days that followed, rumors spread through the settlement. Some whispered about the strange fight that had shaken the night. Others warned that alien trackers were still near. Yet none dared to confront the man's house directly. Fear of the unknown and respect for his quiet strength kept them away. Inside, life resumed its rhythm. The girl continued to cook, turning scraps into meals that felt like feasts. The man worked to repair the door, his hands rough with labor, but his heart steady with new purpose. Each evening they sat together at the table, sharing food in silence that no longer felt empty. One evening, as the sun fell and the kitchen glowed with firelight, the girl set a loaf of bread on the table. She had baked it herself, using what little flour remained. She placed it between them, her eyes shining. "This is not only food," she said softly. "This is a promise. As long as we eat together, we are family." The man stared at the bread, then at her. His throat tightened, but his voice was steady. "Then this family will endure." They broke the bread together, each bite sealing the bond that words could not. For the first time in years, the man felt the weight of loneliness lift from his shoulders. For the first time in her life, the alien girl felt accepted, not as a fugitive, not as an outcast, but as someone who belonged. The kitchen had become more than a room of fire and wood. It had become their world, a place where silence spoke louder than fear, where scars became marks of survival, where trust was built not with promises but with meals shared across a humble table. And though the shadow of her people still hung beyond the horizon, though danger might return, neither of them feared it as they once did, because whatever storm came, they would face it not as strangers but as family. The night ended with laughter, soft and fragile, rising between them for the first time. It was a sound the house had never known before, a sound that carried hope. And in that hope, both human and alien found the beginning of a new story, written not in battle, not in exile, but in the warmth of a kitchen where two lives had become one.